Well, good afternoon or good evening, or if you are in the Pacific Rim and abroad, it is super Saturday morning to you. I am Bruce, Simpler, Faster, Better, aka the guy in the blue shirt, and I own a company called ProcessCleanup.com. So I am so honored to have Miss Chelsea in the house tonight. So Chelsea, I'm going to throw it over to you and let everyone know where you're based this evening, and then we'll get into our disruptive conversation, right?
Oh, yeah. Hey, I'm excited to be here. I'm hanging out in Texas, so it's evening for me here. It's not Saturday yet. I'm looking forward to Saturday.
That's right. I forgot the evening piece. So, we were talking about the wonderful joys of live streaming, right? And like 30 seconds before we were going to go live, it's like whack.
Yeah. I was here by myself. I was like, well, I'll host Process Cleanup. It's fine.
Sure, why not? Hey, you do more of these than I do, so you probably do a way better job than me. At least you'd know the questions to ask yourself, right? Are you still there?
I lost you. Are you there? Oh, there you are.
I'm here. All right, this is very strange. All right, well, we'll stumble through. I guess it's the subject about being disruptive in the education.
That's what it is.
Right?
Definitely.
Yeah, StreamYard thought, you know what, we're gonna jack around with these two so that they won't be able to talk about this subject.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I know you're a leader and a very passionate believer in education in many formats. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you have enjoyed actually being a little disruptive in the educational field, a little non-traditional. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in education always, early education specifically. My degree is child development, and I just always fell in love with it. And I've held pretty much every position that you can hold inside of an early education center, all the way up through directing. And then I was directing at a school for 10 years, and we grew and became accredited and had a first grade and a kindergarten and all these things. And it was just a lot of fun. We maxed out and how much we could grow, but we really were challenging the norms. We were university model, and kind of, instead of saying we do it because we've always done it this way, rather saying we do this why, prove it that that's a valuable way to do it, and then we'll keep doing it that way. Right. And so I really enjoyed that journey. And then I was recruited to a larger school that needed to kind of be rebuilt. It was about a 30-year-old school, and they needed a lot of updating and change and those types of things. So they brought me in to kind of burn it down and rebuild it in the middle of everything running. So like, can you fly the plane, fix the plane, rebuild the plane, but don't land the plane and then keep all the people on the plane? And I was like,
sure.
Yeah, sure, totally. So I did that, and it was just a lot of challenging mindsets around what we do and why we do it. And
yeah,
I don't know, it's fun.
Well, you know, I just absolutely love LinkedIn Lives because there's always common ground that you find with somebody you think, there's no way I'm going to find common ground in this arena. But guess what? I was actually helping doing process improvements in a nonprofit agency for the state of Pennsylvania originally. And they supported the No Child Left Behind program. And they also supported the early start or the kickstart, you know, the early start, Keystone and the STARS program. So we were, because we were in the state of the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, we called our program Keystone Stars. And so, yes, and it was really interesting because what you said about, you know, can you fix the plane, fly the plane? And that agency was losing a lot of money. And I was brought in by the agency owner that had both this state agency program, but also she had a for-profit business as well. And the for-profit business was also losing money. So
that's unfortunate.
Well, it was back to, you know, do we quit all the services? And because we were providing childcare programs and the actual support for the professional development staff in the state in a very rural kind of backward community. So, you know, it it would have been a huge loss for the community. So we said, you know what, we can't really do that. We're in a pretty rural location. The agency had been providing services for more than 20 years, so it would have been a huge loss. So I got stuck in and figured out how to stop the agency losing money and how to make the for-profit make a lot of money to support the agency. So
all good things.
All good things. Yeah. So we did some pretty disruptive things as well, you know? So
yeah.
Yeah.
Something you have to fund it before you can be disruptive. So that's really important.
Correct. Well, and we had some of those, you know, interesting meetings where the grant signers, you know, the people in the state offices, you know, that sign off on all the grants and sign off on all the scope of the support of the systems, they would come audit us. So I've never forgotten my first audit from the state representative that was based in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And it's like, oh, Lordy. And some of the questions they asked, it's like, I have no clue what you just asked me, because, you know, the terminology was different and, you know, everything was different. But hey, we made it work. So
yeah, that's what matters.
So talking of flying the plane, maintaining the plane, taking the wings off and still looking after the people, what's probably the most exciting result you've gotten from that, you know, changing the mindset in education?
I think, you know, the coolest thing is the first thing that I always do when I walk into something like that is burn down the hierarchy, right? Because it's never about me. It's not about me sitting at the top or whoever the leader is, right? It should never be focused that way. So always burning down the hierarchy and shifting it to a round team where we're focusing on the students and the family, and then all of us kind of encompass them in that way. And so that's always the coolest thing to do, and just to go in there, and people are assuming that you're going to come in and just need all of this control and want to make sure that you're managing everything and it's going the way that you want it to go, when really you go in and say, how can we do this as a team? What does it look like for us to do this? Because it doesn't really matter about me. You know, the Mack truck principle, if I get hit by a Mack truck, it still needs to run in a certain way, right? And so that's I think, to watch the face of, in my case, educators, like watch their faces start to take ownership of what they're doing and why they're doing it. And I think that is the foundation for any big mindset shift. Is it's no longer about me telling you, you have to do this way, my way, whatever. It's now saying, how can we all do this together? And I love that. I love that initial shift. Right.
So are you familiar with the term quality circles?
No.
Oh, okay. So it's interesting. Way back in the 80s, particularly here in the USA, the industrial companies ran very much on that pyramid structure where there was a hierarchy, and the leadership thought everybody worked for them, and they didn't really understand that they should be working for everybody else. And number one. And the second piece of that is that they should take that triangle or that big pyramid, you know, tall, and flatten it down to give, like you said, empowerment to the people. Well, back in the early 80s, the US government sent its best process improvement minds over to Japan to help rebuild their industrial environment. And one of the first things those guys did is they created a communication structure called quality circles. So the leader wouldn't be at the top and everybody go talk to them. The leader would sit in the circle and they would start to ask questions around, you know, well, what do you think is up here? You know, what do you think we should improve here? What do you think we should stop doing here? So that's called a quality circle in an industrial environment. So it sounds to me like you took that very same principle and applied it in the educational field, which is awesome.
Yeah, because at the end, it's not even about because at level 1, you got to burn down the hierarchy. It's not about the principal. But in education, level 2 is it's not even about the teacher. It's about the student. Right. So we've got to bring it all the way back down to how are we serving the student, not the other way around. And so we have to kind of keep flattening that circle, that pyramid all the way down to the student.
Yeah, and then the other piece of common ground is it was not so long ago, but in I was born in the UK, but the United Kingdom introduced an academy, which is basically a private schooling sector.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually had the opportunity to go work with the executive team at a brand new academy. And my job was to introduce the whole notion around the students are your customer. And you're the supplier, and it was like, oh lordy. So we had a lot of fun doing that. And the way we did it is we actually mapped out all of their current processes, and then we mapped out, well, what should it be if they were servicing their customers, which was the several thousand students that they had in this academy. The cool thing is they had a brand new building, so they didn't, the wings weren't dropping off the plane at least. So, the plane was nice and new, but they really didn't know how to serve the students as a customer. And it was very exciting to see at least the people that got it. I don't know about you, but we had some casualties along the way.
Yeah.
Have you had some of those?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's always unfortunate. But I do believe in the long run, they wouldn't have been happy there. No. That kind of thing. Like, it's not the culture for them, and that's okay.
Right.
It's better to find that out in the beginning than it is to wait and find it out later.
Well, it was really interesting because we started like crisp on a Monday morning, and I'd done my prep well. And by Wednesday, I could tell there was a lady in the executive team really struggling. And by Wednesday, she spent most of Wednesday in the bathroom. And it was like, are you okay? And anyway, so fast forward to the end of the week, it was really obvious that she was like a square peg in a round hole in this whole, because she just couldn't get past her hierarchical understanding. She was a senior, she was a senior educator, and this whole thing about, well, I have to teach like a 12-year-old kid, like a customer, like she just couldn't wrap her head around it at all. And it
is a big change.
Well, it literally made her feel ill. So like on the Wednesday of the first week, she was literally in the bathroom, not feeling well. It was that much of a misfit for her. So, but not an experience I'd like to repeat, but it's a great lesson learned that, when somebody culturally is totally diverse or not going to fit, it's better that they don't fit early on, right?
Definitely. Otherwise, everybody's sad in the end. And I think one of the cool things about that is about shifting mindsets and those types of things. It's about the introduction of ideas and concepts, and then looking for the biggest buy-in possible, right? Not saying everybody has to completely align with this, but we're looking for buy-in to kind of move this forward. And if someone doesn't have buy-in, they don't have buy-in, and that's okay. But it can be very challenging.
Yeah, well, it was real interesting because I had like half of a person not buying in. And so one of the things that I hadn't planned to do it, but one of the things on the fourth going into the fifth day is I introduced the idea of consensus decision making. They'd never had to do consensus decision making. It was always like, well, I'm going to decide, and you guys are going to follow suit, whether the decision's right, wrong, or indifferent. So so that was a very interesting transition for them, is that, you don't have to agree. You don't have to support, but you have to buy in. And if, and if 4 out of the 6 of you vote that it's the right decision, then you need to support it. Right. Put your personal feelings to one side. So, do the right thing.
Gracie asked me a question. Can I answer Gracie's question?
Yeah, sure.
So my hashtag, what could go wrong? You said it's an interesting hashtag. It totally is. But it's kind of, it came with me from the school that I was talking about when I was working with my leadership team. of course, there was a lot happening. Everybody was upset. People had been let go. People had been brought in. Things were changing. It was, it was a big thing. Right. And so I started talking with my leadership team, like, okay, we're going to do this and it's going to be great. And they'd be like, and my response would be like, oh, it's fine. What could go wrong? Right. And we were introducing growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And so It kind of became slang for growth mindset, kind of like, let's take it on and see what we learn from it. What could go wrong. And, it was funny because it started getting picked up within my leadership team, and then my teachers were using it and we were all kind of using it. And it was cool to see, because then teachers were using it thinking, I wonder if I'll try this in my classroom. Could listen to them talking and they'd be like, I don't know if I'll try this. And someone would be like, oh yeah, totally, go for it. What could go wrong? Right. And so It just kind of became like our mantra. And then when that school closed due to COVID in August and I transitioned into full-time consulting, it followed me. Right. So that's the story.
No, I love that. And Gracie knows me well, that I love to play with hashtags. And it's real interesting because I used to teach a pretty complicated process improvement, and nobody would get it. They couldn't get the terminology. And it's funny because we came up with this thing called the way forward. So we didn't use all the jargon. And when they got stuck, I just used to say, well, what do you think the way forward is, or what should we do? What's the way forward in this? We're stuck. What's the way forward? We've got a problem. What's the way around it?
Right.
Yeah. So like you, that hashtag, the way forward, became a very important piece of the slang, right? It became the new language. And then back to your notion, what could go wrong? I used to use that all the time. Say, as long as you're not going to personally injure yourself,
right?
You're not going to put the team at jeopardy, or you're not going to destroy the building or harm a child, or
right.
Then what could go wrong? I mean, just go for it and see, right?
Yeah, because it's there's no good experiences or bad experiences, just experiences, right? Something we learn from, something we remember, something we move forward with. And, somewhere in that perspective comes a lot of interesting ideas that people will take on that they might not have taken on before.
Yeah. A little I'm going to carry on. Mindset thinking, and I actually had a senior guy I used to work for once, and he used to say to me, hey, what could go wrong, Bruce? And he would say, hey, you only need to be 51% right to be right, and just be 60% to be world class. And that always stuck with me because I was, a habitual procrastinator, overanalyze, over research, and I get stuck. And the guy's name was Chaz, and he used to come to me and say, hey, if you're 50 to 60% sure, just go for it, and we'll figure it out along the way. And that's what stopped my organizational procrastination in my youth. So anyway, I think we lost some of the transmission part of that, so that's why I kept talking. So
I caught the last minute, maybe.
Oh, I know. StreamYard is really weird. Is it did you pay your internet? I think I did.
Yeah, right. I totally did. I think we're solid. I don't even know. Maybe not.
All right, cool. So the consultancy you do, I'm intrigued about that. I love to consult or insult. Sometimes I tell people I'm really an insultant because I don't tell them anything new. I just figure out the stuff that they already know and just repackage.
Yeah, right.
Right. So
yeah.
So what's some of the exciting things you're seeing going on? Because obviously everything from education to work has become a different hybrid package of activities. So what are some of the exciting things you're seeing going on in your space?
One of the coolest things is we're starting to see a lot more autonomy being given to students for their learning. And so this whole concept of free schooling, unschooling, student-led learning, learner-centric design, like all of these things that were a bit taboo, now that we're getting more and more into this new schooling model that we're seeing, parents, people, educators are starting to kind of pick it up and say, oh, it is interesting when my child follows their interest and their curiosity, and when we allow the learner some input in what they're learning and doing and and all of that. So that's one of the coolest things that we're seeing kind of pick up speed, or that I'm seeing pick up speed.
So have you seen any research or any numbers on like the productivity envelope? Because obviously, like many adults, children, not that I'm a daddy, but I've observed children enough to know that children have energy envelopes, and some of them learn better when they're fresh, some of them learn better at the end of the day. And so have you seen any information on that might suggest part of that autonomy is also what's the best time of the day for them to do certain activities?
I haven't seen too terrible much on that, because again, it's so heavily independent to each child, but there has been a lot of things going around specifically around middle school and high school students. And is it really necessary or helpful for them to start so early in the morning, right? And what does the research show if they were to start at like 10 a.m. for them to get that extra rest? And, and the research around that is really interesting. But I think overall, when we're allowing our students or any learners to have that autonomy to be able to kind of structure their day, and try something at one time and go, I didn't really, maybe I'll try this, and rebuild and restructure, just really giving them that autonomy. I've seen it with my own girls. They can be like, I don't like doing this at this time. Can I do it at this time? And I'm like, sure, try it. Why not? And it really helps them.
So what are your thoughts on their speed of learning? I've got my own thoughts, but what are your thoughts on speed of learning when you allow that autonomy to take a hold, as it were?
I think it depends on what you're qualifying as required learning, because I have a much broader perspective of what learning looks like, right? Because there's in a traditional school, you're having the traditional academic subjects, history, math, science, etc., and they're taught independently of each other. But I think if you're really giving that back to the student and allowing them to follow their curiosities and create their schedule, those types of things, so many things kind of cross over. Like, for example, my oldest daughter is taking a junior entrepreneurship course. And so she's crossing, math and art and this and that all into one thing, and so it's to see that interdependent type education model, it really can shorten their day. We're no longer looking at an 8-hour day because she's learning it inside of real life instead of outside in these separate concepts.
Yeah. So I think my view is the same. I think the speed and the quality of execution of learning is much better. And my little example of that is I used to be a volunteer at a Montessori type school approach, and that was so totally different from the way that I went to school. I was in a very rigid period to period, day by day, and you didn't dare be late or divert from the plan, otherwise you got but yeah, when I volunteered in the Montessori type educational, it was like amazing. And I used to see the kids, they used to learn boom boom boom, right? And it's like, wow, I wish I could have learned like that. I would have been
that's autonomy. I mean, it goes back to the concept of psychological safety, right? If you're creating this place of safety where they feel a sense of belonging, a sense of value, all those types of things, they automatically, their brain works better. I mean, they feel safer, they learn faster, so it's interesting to see those different types of environments and how they impact the learner.
Right. So, but I think it applies for adults as well, right? I mean, I've worked with some outwardly, or what people think are outwardly, very comfortable, very secure, very confident people. But when you really work with them on something that's tough or personally tough and challenging for them, it's like they fall apart. It's like, It's
Yeah.
very strange. And
Yeah.
and they put up these barriers to learn. Then it's like, no, they do the like no game instead of no, I can get on it, right? So that's the reverse of no. Say no versus on. Do you want to get on it, or do you want to say no? And so
Yeah.
so it's learning is a very strange process for sure.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely highly individualized, and we're learning more and more every day about how our brain processes information and how we learn best and all those types of things. And so it is definitely going to be challenging to keep up with the most current research inside of our learning environments. But
yep, I definitely have a weird brain, or unique brain. I was told not to say weird. I sure have a unique brain. I can actually join the dots of disassociated processes in my brain when I sleep, which is extraordinarily weird because I'll have a complete fog sometimes when I go to sleep, and then the next morning or the next day or later that week it's like, oh, I just need to do this, this, and this, and somehow all the dots have aligned, and it's like, wow, how did my brain do that? But anyway, so
yeah, so interesting.
All right, well, awesome. So what's coming up for you? I mean, this week I know you've been like guest host or host and guest like crazy this week. So
yeah, it's fun. I love getting to do my podcast. Always so much fun to get to just meet other people who are doing other things. I love that.
Right.
And that's a big cool thing on LinkedIn, is getting to meet all kinds of people who are doing all kinds of cool stuff, and how do they link together, and people you never thought that you would work with or have a conversation with, and you're like, oh, well, that's really cool. So I'm really loving that. I'm loving just the conversations and some of the clients I get to work with. I'm just having fun with it right now.
So why don't you do a shameless plug for your podcast? Give it a shout out when it happens, and how people can get to it. And go ahead.
Yeah, it happens on Wednesdays at 4 is when we go live, and it goes live on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, and all that. And then obviously you can watch the replay here or on YouTube, follow the channel, but it's called What Could Go Wrong Live, #WhatCouldGoWrongLive. And then the podcast is available on all the different podcasty thingies. So wherever you listen to podcasts. But yeah, it was kind of it actually started because a friend of mine had been applying for LinkedIn Live and not getting it. And so I was like, haha, I'm going to apply and I'm going to get it. And then I did. And then I didn't know what to do with it. And I was like, oh no, now what am I supposed to do with this? And a friend of mine was like, we should go on and talk about education. I was like, okay, cool. And then, that was a couple months ago, and now here we are. So it's fun.
Okay. Well, if you ever want any, interesting guests, I've had a lot of very interesting people on my lives before, so don't hesitate.
Yeah, for sure.
And I know there's some very interesting people in the fringes of the educational field that have started to find a voice by using live. I mean, this time last year, I would never, ever have dreamt that I'd be a LinkedIn Live host, which I'm, honored to have and to keep up with. And like you said, for me, it's the unusual learning because there's always common ground. It happens every single live, or at least this year it has for me. It's like you think, well, there's no way there's going to be real common ground between the person you're talking with, and then all of a sudden the early education thing came up, and it's like, not only that, but the early childcare piece of that as well that supports the education. It's like, and people don't realize that that's like a booming industry. I mean, it's like a mega industry that is kind of a service that sort of happens in the background, and people don't realize that it's a big business. So
yeah. So
amazing.
Important.
Sure is. Okay. All right. So what time? 4 is that Central time?
Central. Yeah.
On a Wednesday. Okay. All right. Awesome. Well, thank you, Chelsea, so much. And again, if you're seeing this actually as a replay, if you wouldn't mind putting #replay in, you can ask more questions, or You can put comments in between myself and Chelsea. We would love to answer questions. If you're shy, you can DM us or direct message us or private message us, whichever you prefer. And we would love to hear from you, either about what Chelsea does or what I do, or just advice. You know, if you want any advice on types of learning, disrupting the educational field, then Chelsea is your lady. So
it'll be fun, at the very least. I think you froze, or I froze.